Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday storytelling session. Hope everyone is okay this morning. If you joined me yesterday, you'll know that we started the Unmumsy Mum. It's written by Sarah Turner, and it's just a brief glimpse into parenthood. It's very funny. Like I said yesterday, I've read this book before. I love it. It does make you laugh because there's so many things and things that happen in it that you can sort of relate with. And it's not just for mums, it's for dads, it's for step parents, it's for grandparents, it's for carers. Really, anyone can relate to it. So without further ado, we shall carry on. So get yourselves comfy and off I'll go. Obviously, I can see now that shedding tears over lasagna residue was highly irrational. I was being ridiculous. But it felt very rational at the time. In fact, it was one of the most instinctive and compulsive feelings I've ever had. I needed to clean the nest. It wasn't until a couple of weeks after the birth that I could walk down the cleaning aisle in Tesco without attempting to sniff test how citrus fresh the products were. Barry doesn't do it for me sexually anymore, just so we're clear. The second pregnancy-related quirk I was hit with was cravings. Less so in my first pregnancy, unless you count my chicken sandwich meals, and I've been craving those for the best part of 29 years. But certainly in the latter part of my second pregnancy, I developed quite a hardcore craving for ice. Not icy drinks or ice lollies, but ice cubes. Popped straight from the freezer tray into my mouth and crunched one by one as if they were peanut M&Ms. For every tray I demolished, I would freeze another so I would never run out. Because running out would have been catastrophic to my emotional well-being. Apparently, ice cube crunching can be symptomatic of iron deficiency, and it is very common in pregnancy. Whatever it was that compelled me to crunch up to 50 ice cubes a day, it was bloody odd. Just the thought of it makes my teeth hurt. So my pregnancy adventure was nothing if not interesting, and a blessing, and just a little bit crap. I am pushing. Childbirth fascinates me. Despite having been slightly traumatised 16 years ago when I witnessed Sarah Lou give birth on Corrie, I have more recently become a big fan of One Born Every Minute, and I was looking forward to having my own birth story to tell. I was also looking forward to bidding farewell to the surface spraying, vomiting and ice crunching. Labour is a proper rite of passage into motherhood, isn't it? Whichever way the baby comes out, by the sunroof or down the lady garden slide, it's the point at which you gain entry to the club. I couldn't wait to earn my I've given birth badge, and I plan to wear it proudly to baby groups, where I would exchange knowing nods with other mums who had birthed tiny, and on occasion not so tiny, humans from their bodies. I now have 2 stories to share, and when people ask me, how was the birth, or was it really awful, I give my honest assessment, which is this: it entirely depends on which birth you're asking me about. Because I'm fairly certain the same woman did not give birth to my 2 children. If I had written this chapter directly after the birth of Henry, it would have been a pretty positive one. If I had written this chapter directly after the birth of Jude, it would have been a very short one, probably just holy shit. This leaves me with an interesting quandary. What should I share with you in this chapter? How should I pitch it when I'm not even sure I have made sense of my feelings yet? So I have settled on simply sharing the 2 births as I remember them and reflecting honestly on a few of the thoughts I've had since. Here we go then. The birth of Henry. After a false start bang on his due date, 13th of February, I went into labour probably on Valentine's Day. It all started pretty calmly, with James monitoring the regularity of my contractions using the contraction timer app on his iPhone as I sat bouncing on the exercise ball in front of Lorraine. I bloody love Lorraine. She's been there through many an important life moment, and it seems only right that she was party to the onset of my first labour. We engaged in endless chats about whether we packed everything in the hospital bag, Me and James, I mean, not me and Lorraine. I'd unpacked and repacked the bag at least 10 times because something I'd read on the internet said I needed 2 packs of maternity pads, and that couldn't be right, surely. Then I had the show, which, despite sounding quite fun and making me want to do jazz hands, was, in reality, gross. Just to be sure it was indeed showtime, I ended up showing it to James, who was understandably disgusted. During that same hour, I think Jeremy Kyle was on by this point, my waters broke. It was all pretty textbook. It didn't stay textbook for long though, and I started vomiting quite badly. Cue James directing said vomit away from the new sofas, and in return, me giving him the death stare for worrying about the sofa fabric when I was preparing to expel 3 kilograms of baby out of my fandango. To add to the excitement, I could tell by looking at the colour of what was coming out of my fandango that something wasn't right. I think the babies shat in my waters. They mentioned something about this at those classes. I therefore wasn't at all surprised when, after waddling into the midwife-left birthing unit, the one we carefully selected for the least clinical and most naturally empowering birth experience that wasn't our home, we were packed straight off to the hospital. Alongside the baby's in utero dirty protest, my blood pressure was rocketing, and by the time I had my first examination at the Royal Devon and Exeter, the situation was confirmed. I had preeclampsia. Shit. Preeclampsia is some serious business, which explains why there was a multitude of important people in the room whose brows were furrowed at all times. Apart from the contractions, which had intensified beyond the point of being able to chat comfortably to James about the choice of snacks he packed in his hospital bag, I was actually feeling all right. I was finding it more tolerable than I'd expected, and following a gloriously pain-free couple of hours, thanks to an epidural, and after my mistaken intuition that I was about to poo myself, baby Henry arrived naturally without too much fuss. If I had been filmed for an episode of One Born Every Minute, I would have been quite proud. You did so well, babe, James told me. I really did. I kept my shit together, both figuratively and literally, and subsequently told curious friends it really wasn't that bad. The birth of Jude. 2 years and 7 months later, I went into labour for the second time and became a total monster. If I had been awarded a medal for composure in childbirth the first time, it would have been stripped from me the second time. I became that woman on One Born Every Minute, the one you sit watching with your cup of tea and 5 custard creams thinking, for God's sake, woman, pull yourself together. I lost the plot. It's difficult to pinpoint the moment it all went a bit peak-tong because, on paper, unlike during the first birth, I was all right. There was no blood pressure crisis or risk of fitting, and everyone at the hospital seemed quite chilled out. Everyone, that is, except me. I had failed to prepare for the possibility of a trickier birth, instead wholeheartedly buying into the whole second birth is easier promise. There was no doubt in my mind that I would boss it, which, in hindsight, was a foolish error. The reality was that the birth of young Jude took almost twice as long and was considerably more painful. The calm and collected woman from birth 1 failed to show up for birth 2. She sent her twin sister instead. She was a bit of a moron. James's assessment of Jude's delivery, which kind of erased the reigning "you did so well, babe" praise, was, "You were mental. I've never seen anything like it." Throughout the labour, I switched from hysterical to withdrawn. I splashed into the birthing pool with the expectation of labouring serenely while submerged in water. But it was less than an hour before I ungracefully heaved myself out, demanding something that works. When James dared to suggest I should stick the pool out for a bit longer, I snapped angrily at him that I needed more than a giant effing bath. I puffed on gas and air for a bit, felt slightly dizzy and lightheaded, and then discarded the mouthpiece in a sulk. I wanted an epidural. I was talked out of an epidural. The wonderful and bloody patient midwife, Trish I think her name was, we'll call her Trish, explained that the baby could arrive in just an hour or 2. The epidural might slow things down. It might lead to an unnecessary stay in hospital the following day. James agreed. I had probably just reached the wall and our boy would be with us in no time. Diamorphine arrived. I had 2 doses of that bad boy before becoming sleepy and unresponsive. I had been awake for 24 hours by this point and was so bloody exhausted that I fell asleep, sitting up between contractions, moaning like a wounded out animal. At one stage, James informs me I refused to communicate for several hours and sat silently rocking on the bed, occasionally glaring at him and poor Trish. I mean, what the... In my defence, I genuinely wondered whether I was dying from the pain. I can recall thinking that it would be a relief to die. Irrational doesn't even come close. My contractions were wearing off due to low blood sugar levels. I needed a sugary drink. I refused the sugary drink. And then the pièce de résistance of my birthing performance came when I was 10 centimetres dilated and I went on to the most pointless strike of my life and refused to push. I want an epidural, I wailed at nobody in particular, and was quite rightly ignored because that ship had sailed about 5 centimetres earlier. I want a cesarean. I want to die. Yep. Everyone became concerned. Trish had a stern word. According to James, I then pretended to push, mumbling, I am pushing, while blatantly failing to direct any effort downwards. I must have picked my game up, though, and pushed for real eventually, because after 3 hours and after feeling the familiar sensation of trying to shit a cannonball, baby Jude finally arrived. What a relief. I remember cradling him in his little towel, thinking he looked proper, lovely and pink, just like he should, and not at all bothered by his mother's reluctance to help him out of the birth canal. I was so elated it was all over. And then the placenta got stuck. I had no idea that was even a possibility. The placenta never gets stuck when people give birth on telly, does it? Where the hell is the placenta on TV births? I've never seen a woman give birth on Holby and then witnessed the medical team jabbing her in the leg with an injection to bring on the afterbirth before carting off what looks like a giant stingray, if a stingray had the texture of internal organs. I sure as hell haven't ever seen a placenta get stuck, but sure enough, mine did. There was talk of spinals and theatre, and several attempts to manipulate it were made before one doctor succeeded where all others had failed. I am not going to describe exactly how this happened, but the adjective James used later to describe what he witnessed in that moment was brutal. So you probably get the picture. And then it really was over. We enjoyed a delightful round of tea and toast and stared some more at our beautiful bundle wrapped up snugly in his plastic crib. He was still unnamed at this point. I wanted to call him Wilf, following a very wobbly hot shower and plenty of "Christ, that was awful, wasn't it?" conversations. We left the hospital and our life as a newly extended family of 4 began. I have subsequently laughed about the chaos of Jude's delivery. I was a nightmare. Trust me to have a stubborn placenta. But the truth is it knocked me for 6, and until now I have avoided thinking about it. In many ways, it undid all the positives I'd taken from Henry's birth, which is a shame. I don't watch One Born every minute anymore, but if I did, I am certain I would no longer feel like slapping some sense into the mums having a meltdown, because I get it now. They are not being irrational, they just don't know what to do. Having given quite a lot of thought to what I would do differently if I ever had another one, stand down, James. This is a hypothetical as what I'd do if we'd won the lottery. I have come up with the following 2 courses of action. Firstly, I would research hypnobirthing. I have seen and read some amazing things about hypnobirthing, and at the heart of it, there seems to be an emphasis on feeling empowered and maintaining control, something I definitely lost during birth too. There has to be a reason why celeb and non-celeb mums alike are raving about it. And if I had my pregnancy time again, I'd give it a shot. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? Secondly, if ever I found myself in that same amount of pain again, I would press more firmly for an epidural. Every centimetre of my body was crying out for help at that point, and I really regretted not having one. Yes, I know there are advantages to going natural and drug-free, But it turns out I much preferred the birth with all the drugs. I'm not ashamed of that. There are no prizes for managing without. And if I had my pregnancy time again, I would have hooked myself up to an epidural the moment I discovered 2 blue lines on the pregnancy test. I'm joking, kind of. I have heard and read so many birth stories over the last few years, ranging from traumatic and scary emergency C-sections to unbelievably rapid deliveries in hospital car parks. And the more I read, the more I am certain that no 2 labours are the same. Every birth is unique. Every woman is an individual. And some women, me included, behave differently to themselves in differing situations. Part of my reluctance to look back at Jude's delivery stems from embarrassment, I think. It's one thing rocking on all fours with all your bits out, but it's quite another shouting panicked expletives as you rock on all fours with all your bits out. All things considered, though, I have no doubt that the midwives have seen it all before. So perhaps there is no need to beat ourselves up if we have a bit of a meltdown. Though, Trish, if you're reading this, I would like to say that I'm sorry for scowling, shouting, and smacking your hand away when you tried to check the baby's heartbeat with the Doppler thingy. Basically, I'm sorry for being a bit of a twat. I would also like to say thank you for seeing past my twattishness and safely delivering a beautiful little boy to take home to my beautiful not-so-little boy. You do an unbelievably special job. Respect of the highest order, midwife folk. He can't be effing hungry. I don't think anything prepares you for the trauma of night feeds. Well, I don't think anything prepares you for the constant day feeds either. Within hours of leaving the hospital, I had ascertained that my new life would be dictated by milk. But my God, night feeds are something special. By special, I mean they are a bit shit. My mental preparation, first time around, was to tell myself that I would be knackered, but that I would catch up on lost sleep during the day. Sorry. I quite simply had no idea. It's never just about the lost sleep. It's about having to undertake frustrating tasks several times a night without having had any sleep. Feeding, nappy changing, winding, vomit cleaning, sheet stripping, more nappy changing. I can recall, during one of many feeds, staring at the ceiling in a trance, wondering if it was possible to die from tiredness, and concluding that, if it was, my time had come. It seemed to me that sleep must have been regulating hidden, unstable tendencies lurking in my subconscious for the preceding 25 years, and that lack of sleep had introduced the Hyde to my Jekyll. How I longed for sleep. Never before had I understood the expression, "I give my right arm for." But in the thick of sleep deprivation, I would have given my right leg as well. In an attempt to further maximise our chances of a solid 4 hours sleep, when did 4 hours become a good amount of sleep? When did it? James and I trialled white noise as a soother. First, we downloaded a whole album of white noise from iTunes, rock and roll. Later, when times got desperate and we allowed ourselves to be taken in by Miracle Baby products on Amazon, we purchased a bear stuffed with a white noise player. I think it was of some benefit. We used to sleep with it between us and whack it when the threat of baby wakeage was imminent. Who knows, to be honest? But falling asleep to a medley of fan noises and gentle waves certainly became the norm in our house. So much so, we willingly engaged in the middle of the night, post-nappy, changing conversations about our favourite tracks. Move it to the next one. I like the Gentle Rain best, don't you? We had lost the plot by this point. You pray it will get better, and usually, eventually it does, until such a time you endure the night feeds in a series of desperately shit stages. The night feed in 5 psychological stages. Number 1, hope. As the baby drifts off to sleep, sandwiched between the soft bunny comforter and the white noise contraption, you allow yourself to dream that this could be the night. Tonight will be different. Number 2, denial. You have been asleep for no more than 5 minutes and he is awake. This cannot be, you think. You ignore the frantic crying and whack the white noise thingy in a last-ditch attempt to settle him. This is a fruitless exercise, but you have not yet come to terms with the fact he wants feeding again. Just go back to sleep, you say quietly, to nobody in particular, while sobbing. Number 3, the standoff. Now you have established that he's well and truly awake. He is the colour of a beetroot. Half the street can hear his screams. You lie perfectly still. Your stillness sends a body language message to your husband. I am asleep. I am not getting up. You pray he will get up. He doesn't even stir. Marvellous. Sometimes you commence a standoff only half-heartedly because you need to get up for a wee, so the game is already over. Number 4, rage. You angrily turn the nightlight on, accidentally kick said husband in the ribs and declare, "How is he bloody hungry? Why is he being such a dick? This is ridiculous. Bloody ridiculous," as you whisk the baby out of his cot and commence the feed, sighing loudly. If your husband does wake during this stage, he can expect you to hear you declare, "Never having another one," or alternatively, "Having another one was a mistake," or "I hate my bloody life." If he doesn't wake up, you will be so annoyed with his snoring or breathing, you will want to punch him in the face. Number 5, guilt. The baby smiles at you. Between the swearing and the start of divorce proceedings, that little bundle of agitated loudness starts cooing and gurgling. You now feel awful for having blamed him for ruining your life and calling him a dick. So while feeding, you whisper, "Shh, it's all right. Is that nice? Do you like your milk?" While reflecting on what a terrible mother you are and searching netmums for threads where other people admit to calling their babies dicks. You will never find such threads, which further reinforces your conclusion that you are, in fact, a terrible accident of motherhood. Eventually, after a through-the-soup poo explosion, you all settle back to sleep, where you have approximately 55 minutes before this hope, denial, standoff, rage, guilt cycle of doom starts again. I should point out that James did more than his fair share of night feeds, but we came to an agreement early on that I would do the lion's share of night duty while I was off on maternity leave. After all, he would be driving to work in the morning. I wasn't jealous at all that he would get to go to the work in the morning. Not at all. I think people reflect very differently on their experiences of doing the night feeds. I have been offered some reasonable advice along the way, like, it gets easier. It really does. It's not forever. It really isn't. And just take it one night at a time. That's all you can do ultimately. But I have also read some absolute bollocks about making sure you treasure the night feeds, treasure them. And I want to make it clear that you are under no obligation to find enjoyment here. I mean, it's more than possible that between the sleep deprivation and the hysteria, you just might encounter some magical moments of calm when the rest of the world is sleeping and just the two of you are awake. You might discover it's your special time for bonding. But it's also fine if you make no such discovery. For me, said special times for bonding were simply more welcome during the daytime. I never resented my boys for waking me in the night. I mean, I did at the time, in that moment, when I called them dicks, my bad. But in the grander scheme of things, I didn't. Babies need a lot of food, and I never truly expected them to sleep for 12 hours. I knew I would have to endure those night feeds. All things considered, that turned out to be one of the least surprising parts about having a baby, but it didn't mean they were any less hard. "You'll never get this time again," people warned me after hearing me complain about night feed tiredness. Well, thank F for that, quite frankly. I don't want that time again. If you are reading this as a brand new parent or a parent-to-be, I'm not going to bullshit you with any guarantees. Having a baby is much like buying a second-hand car. You are willingly entering into a lottery you have no control over, and all you could do is hope for the best. I know somebody whose baby did not sleep through the night until he was, in fact, almost 3. And there was somebody else whose baby slept through after just a few weeks. We were unlucky in the sleep stakes the first time. Henry woke up hourly for an awfully long time, and it nearly broke me. But we struck gold with Jude, who simply loves sleeping, despite having been treated to the exact same routine as his brother. Just make sure you exercise caution when you inevitably enter into the baby Olympics at playgroup. Whose baby sleeps the longest? Whose baby has the strongest neck? Whose baby clapped first? Yawn. Because the concept of sleeping through is not uniform. I once met a mum who declared that her baby was sleeping through at 5 weeks. I just wanted to smack her in the face. The mum, not the baby, just to be clear. Turns out her concept of sleeping through was midnight until 5 a.m. Midnight is when we go to bed. 5 a.m. is just an early morning start. Perhaps there's something to be said of that level of positivity. But I beg to differ that her baby was sleeping through, though I certainly wanted to punch her slightly less after that, give or take an hour. 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. has always been our definition of sleeping through. Aim high, my friends. The good, the bad, and the lumpy. Breastfeeding highs and lows. I have discovered that most mums have a breastfeeding story to tell. Their breastfeeding journey, as it were, there's that word again, bloody hell. When I was pregnant, I found most of the breastfeeding literature to be quite dull, factual, feeding your baby blurb accompanied by images from the 1980s depicting the correct positioning of the baby's mouth around the areola and warnings about mastitis. This was all highly practical and really rather necessary when I later found myself staring at a brand new baby who was gumming at any skin he could find, including his dad's hairy chest. I was relieved to be well versed in the health benefits, the cost benefits, and all the stuff they put in the leaflets. But I was also eager to hear some more candid tales, the less leaflet-friendly stuff. What was breastfeeding really like? So here's what I learned about breastfeeding, on my journey. At first, it's bloody hard work. I found breastfeeding in the early days pretty relentless. The first few weeks are a shock to the system anyway, and having a small human welded to your nipples for an apparent eternity is exhausting. Feeding on demand does what it says on the tin, and during the first couple of months with both boys, I felt like a slave to lactation. With Henry, there were times when he fed for an hour and less than an hour later wanting feeding again for another hour. I remember reaching the point of no return, then the deliriously tired point where you laugh and cry at the same time, sobbing to James that the baby was on a bender. He's binge drinking. On those days, it was pretty painful, and I faffed around with nipple shields, creams, and alternative positioning, reclining ungracefully on the sofa, an attempt to bring baby to breast in all manner of interesting ways, remembering what I'd read in those leaflets I'd been given. I saw a breastfeeding counsellor who advised that I could try viewing each feed as the baby's opportunity to have a 3-course meal. Breast 1 could be his starter and main, to allow for 2 letdowns, and if he finished those, I could offer the second breast as dessert. This was actually really helpful advice, but I just wanted to scream at everyone. I wanted to mourn the loss of my existence outside of sitting on the sofa with my breasts out. I wanted to shout about how unfair it was that I never finished a meal unless James cut everything into fork-sized chunks. And when I finally did get a break for the jackpot of 40 winks, it was invariably cut short by the phrase of doom. I think he's hungry again. It's also bloody handy. At many other times, the boobs were in favour, because in my tired, dishevelled and frankly zombified state, those boobs were one less thing to worry about packing in the changing bag. Wherever we were, there was milk, not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Who bloody Ray? My boobs were like my weapon of choice, something always in the locker. One time, when baby Jude threatened to have a meltdown on a train, I unclipped my bra, literally shoved a boob in his face, and continued to read Heat magazine while relaxing out the window. It is one of those vivid moments when I recall thinking, thank God for that. Another breastfeeding is the bomb realisation came when, after switching to bottles, we found ourselves dangerously low on formula reserves one Sunday afternoon when all the shops had shut. You said you were getting some, and furthermore, when we totted up the £40 plus it was costing us each to buy our tubs of Cowngate, breastfeeding is free, and if that doesn't make it a little bit incredible, I don't know what does. Right, I think we're going to finish there for today. Hope you all enjoyed that. It makes me laugh as I'm reading it because there's just so many things in there that just reminds me of when my kids were younger and the arguments with my husband, who's getting up to do the night feed and things like that. So really, this book really makes me laugh when I'm reading it. Brings back some funny memories, which I can laugh about now, but I probably didn't laugh about however many years ago my kids were babies. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that this morning. We will carry on with that tomorrow morning, same time, 10 o'clock. And we've got tea and toast in about half an hour with me and Luke. Luke? Me and Luke. So come and join us if you can. If not, hope you all have a great day and I'll see you all soon. Bye.